We have other members of GBOS online. We'll start with our announcements, or sorry, our statement first that the Girdwood Board of Supervisors, its committee and subcommittees are subject to the Open Meetings Act, as found in Alaska Statute 44.62.310 and Anchorage Municipal Code 125 Public Meetings. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors operates under the Girdwood Public Meeting Standards of Conduct. Calling this meeting to order, and I'll start with our land acknowledgement. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors acknowledges the indigenous peoples of Alaska whose land we reside on. The community of Girdwood, situated between the areas known to be denied an electric homeland, respects the people who were stewards of this land for generations, and we commit to the continued stewardship of this land. We are grateful to be part of a wider community that seeks to maintain a sustainable use of Girdwood Valley for present. So I believe online, let me start with Mike.
Present here.
And Brianna.
Present, thank you.
And Kelly. Tell if Kelly's on.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon.
Oh, I think that's a different Kelly.
Different Kelly. Okay, thank you.
That's Kelly Toast, Head Director of Solid Waste Services.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, and then I would like to have the, if we have the people in the room introduce themselves, we can start at this end of people.
It's Daniel McKenna-Foster. I'm sitting in front of Lisa Pat.
Tiffany Briggs, Real Estate Director.
Brandon Telford. I'm the engineering manager with the project management engineering department.
Becky Winterson, Municipal Manager.
Bob Dole, Director of Community Economic Development.
Shanna Gamble, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Welcome.
Zach Schwartz, Assistant Municipal Attorney.
And Quincy Arms, Managing Assistant Municipal Attorney.
Okay. And then online, I will start with Melinda.
Yes, hello, I'm Melinda Kohlhaas, PM&E Director.
Thank you. And now Kelly Toth, please.
Yes, thank you so much.
And Ryan Young.
Yes, good afternoon. Ryan Yell with Heritage Land Bank.
Thank you so much. Did I miss anybody or is
Kyle Kelly.
Oh, Kyle Kelly, yes. All right. Now, yeah, the public is encouraged to ask questions, provide comment. Please raise your hand, wait to be acknowledged. To keep discussions stay productive, please direct comments to the board. I would start with any agenda revisions and approvals. So do we have any comments for the Girdwood Board of Supervisors? Do we have any objections to the agenda as it stands?
Brianna has her hand up.
Okay, Brianna.
I'm sorry, I have a hard time hearing everything, so I'm going to get out and try a new way to log in. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
All right, I am going to take that. And Mike, do you have any changes to the agenda? Or are we good to
No
go?
changes. Happy with it as it is.
And then in that case, let's dive right in with the agenda item number 1, which is the Heritage Land Bank, discussing timeline for completion and platting of Orchard View and Girdwood Industrial Park and GDS and Work and Industrial Park 1.
All right, Tiffany, you and Ryan ready to give us that timeline?
Yes, so the plats for both of those subdivisions should be recording mid-March or mid-April at the latest. And I'm not sure what specifically regarding the GDSA work on the industrial park lot what that is.
Let me actually check with Kyle. Kyle Kelly, did we have specific questions about the Girdwood Industrial Park?
No, I think Ryan and crew are doing a good job of pushing that forward, and the survey crew was down there today putting in monuments for the new plat, so for the new corners down there, so things are moving along.
I guess I would ask, what is the estimated timeline before the step where the lots would actually be handed over or potentially disposed of?
So timeline is we still need to take that item to HLBAC and then to the assembly. So that easily is a 3-month minimum, depending on where it falls in the calendar. But we can work with Kyle on getting an application for the GBSA lot. We can work with that offline.
Okay. So, I mean, is summer, fall likely?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions or comments on that item? I think we can move on to intergovernmental charges and GSA budgets.
And on this item, I know we talked about this being potentially something that needs a meeting of its own that's longer and more in depth. And I know that Ona had been in touch, Kyle, with you and Mike about scheduling a time to set that meeting. And I think she'd indicated there were a couple different possible windows you guys were batting around for that meeting. And I had asked her to just really make sure that she pushed through to make sure you guys scheduled that. So we had that on the books for you to have that in-depth walkthrough with the OMB staff. I know she's going to pop in a little bit just to see if there were any other additional questions, but I think the real outcome here was for us to make sure that we set that time up so that you had the time, which again, I agree is more than just this. It's a dedicated meeting unto itself. So as long, Kyle and Mike, as that matches your understanding, I think the deliverable here is just for us to make sure that we get that meeting on the calendar, but let me know if any of that sounds off base.
I agree. I think it's an in-depth topic and it's going to take more than the time we have available in this meeting. So I agree with a separate meeting.
And if you got those messages from Ona about setting time?
I saw it. I've left it mostly in the hands of staff. Haven't had a
Okay,
chance
excellent.
to engage with it.
So Kyle,
Yeah.
you'll work with Ona to set a time and make sure that you have all the folks you want on your end, on the Girdwood end there to walk through that meeting?
Yes, we'll get it figured out. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, thank you guys. Anything else we should talk about?
No, I don't, if nobody else has anything, nothing else on that, right, Mike? Then we'll move on to item number 3, GBSA interest in Title 21, Chapter 9 code change to implement dark sky initiative in Girdwood. That was kind of my question, and the question is, how can we do it or can we do it?
And that's why Daniel Brenner here, just as kind of a brain trust to toss around ideas with you. This seemed to me like the meatiest item potentially for discussion today in terms of like, what are the possibilities, what's already in code, what isn't, and then what might we do? And I know you guys had done some thinking already about what is in code already, and we'd be happy to share to start us off.
Yeah, I'm absolutely familiar with the Girdwood code. One of the things that's interesting about the Girdwood code is different from the Anchorage code is that, I believe it's different than the Anchorage code is it actually extends its lighting requirements onto property, which I don't believe are code requirements.
And this is Title 21, right,
Yeah.
the Girdwood chapter?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's got a section on street lighting and a section on exterior site lighting. In terms of street lighting, our criteria were developed, like our city criteria, design criteria, and our center specifications, they were developed with dark skies in mind. So we've implemented the dark sky practices that are available for street lighting. The code goes on to actually extend some of those practices onto site lighting as well. So something like full cutoff fixtures is one of the big ticket items for dark skies is full cutoff fixtures, excuse me. And that shows up in the exterior site lighting section of code. So I'm curious personally what it is that the board of supervisors is trying to achieve by making the change.
Sure. This came up when I was speaking with the developer with Connie Yoshimura and CY Investments, and she mentioned during several of our community meetings an interest in having the lower than what she said were required streetlights. And I said, oh, wonderful, finally kismet and overlap of interests. That because Girdwood definitely has an interest in dark sky, and we're in a slightly different position than Anchorage with the majority of our neighborhoods not already having streetlights. So it also allows us to bring in not only maybe a stricter, I'm a little surprised to hear it already because again, I heard it from the developer originally that she had to be a certain height. She would prefer to be lower and we would prefer it to match our existing lights. So So that was the impetus.
Do you know the specifics of that, Tiffany? Like what were the changes that were applied, or maybe this isn't you at all, maybe it is, maybe it's you. What changes were applied to Connie and Holden Hills that differed from standard code requirements for, I know it's specifically, Jennifer, for streetlights?
Specifically for streetlights, and she was just saying that it was the height required seemed excessive for Girdwood and Girdwood area, and also didn't match my understanding of dark sky practices. It's fascinating to hear that I mean, it sounds like it's already in code, but again, I heard from the developer that she wanted something, and I thought, well, that makes sense with us. So it seems to me like there's a disconnect on it.
So in Girdwood code right now for a local street, which I believe is, we get into actually the entirety of the proposed road for subdivision is local street. So the local street fixture height is 20 feet, which is lower than what it is in acreage. Acreage is 30. And so it's when you get to a collector street, where you get into the 25-foot height, and the Hero streets go to 35-foot height in the code for Girdwood. So you've already gotten code that you
I think we may have lost audio. I can't hear anything.
Thank you. Sorry, where'd you
I
lose us,
can't
guys?
either.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, somehow we ended up being muted.
I think start where you were at 20 and 30 feet.
We'll go
is
back
kind
to
of when I
20
saw
feet
that
and
one.
30 feet.
Yeah, so the standard for local streets of Girdwood White right now is a pole height of 20 feet or a fixture height of 20 feet. And a consequence of that is if you're providing continuous lighting along the street, you end up needing to bring your pole spacing in closer together, which means you need to install more poles or poles more frequently in order to get the same lighting effect that you would get from a taller street light. So that's cost a little bit. For the case of the development, generally the code says that street lighting on local residential streets should be avoided if possible. And so based on the conversations that I've overheard or had with the developer and her team, it sounds like, they're really wanting to minimize the amount of street lighting, and maybe install maybe intersection lighting, which is an alternative to doing continuous lighting, which is sort of placing them at the intersections where a lot of the conflicts occur. So you can get away from the tighter space light fixtures by just installing them at intersections. You don't get the same safety benefit from that for the non-motorized users, the walkers on the street. I know I was involved in discussions around the standard for what has currently been built, which is the road that's going to connect the neighborhood into the community and go past the school. And we felt the safety benefits of continuous lighting were warranted given the access between the neighborhood and the school. So we did opt for continuous lighting, and I believe I'd have to actually probably can pull plans up and look, but I would imagine we used a 20-foot pole height and the more frequent spacing. But I can check and confirm that real quick. Because the alternative would have been to use a taller pole so we can get the lights more spaced out, and that would reduce costs overall.
I think we understand that the road in is what it is. And so this was kind of about finding compromise. This was about finding compromise and agreement between the Girdwood area and the developer. And I do want to bring in, Mike, I see your hand up. I want to really quickly bring in Kyle, because I believe what we were looking at with Connie was under a 20-foot light that matched what we have behind Fire Hall, right? Kyle, is that correct?
I think we discussed that and it works. And I think we had something similar to that up on Verbier in that project. So those were working within those areas.
And so the developer in that situation was willing to have the closer light posts And she also said that she was going to have some cost saving and having them lower, so she thought it might potentially work out. Mike, did you want to chime in here?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. I think one of our questions was how does the other documents, the DCM, the official highway plan, relate to code, or can just Title 21 define the standards we want? That was unclear. If somebody could help clarify that, or take away as an option, or take away as a task, a way to get us that information, that would be helpful. That was one question. The second part is I'm a bit confused by the answer. What you're saying is the existing code follows dark sky practices, but we've seen construction in the last decade or so that does not follow dark sky practices. I think the Alberg extension is an example of that. That produces a lot of light in the neighborhood, uplighting as well. It's a very bright area. And that presumably meets code, or, doesn't exceed code. So I'm confused about these two statements. It may be that if the requirement is continuous lighting, it's not going to meet the best dark sky standards. And that may be where the disconnect is. So if you're saying there must be continuous lighting, which there isn't in much of the community, maybe that's where the disconnect is. So if the code is required to meet continuous lighting, then I see you're going to get a lot of light being generated, and that may be why it doesn't appear to me to what we would like. But so I'm not convinced that code does follow those principles, and definitely I'd like to understand if just a change in Title 21 Chapter 9 would be adequate, or whether it would require changes in these other documents as well.
You guys know the answer to that question off the top of your head, whether we have to change the DSM as well, or if we, or the DCM as well, or do we have to, or is it just 21 that would be changed?
So I think there's a legal question, and there's a practical question.
Yeah.
I think there's a good legal question in terms of since the DCM has adopted its regulation, there's a conflict between the DCM
and the code.
And the code.
Yeah.
Is it the code that we follow?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the practical question of when we do a group of development in Girdwood, when we're doing a street improvement, we do follow the Girdwood code over to the DCM. So where there's conflict, we follow the Girdwood code. It's difficult to speak to the site lighting section because while the site lighting code exists, I don't know what mechanism exists to enforce it, or I believe Girdwood is a land use area, so it gets limited plan review.
So yeah.
And so if a developer were to be developing a site development and installing fixtures that don't conform to dark sky standards, we would not know.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add a bit to that? And Kyle, I'm going to try and share something if everybody can see it. There's also the difference of the stuff that's in the right of way generally probably should be in Title 21. And most of the rest of the code we're trying to put, if the rules of construction or lights in the right of way general go through regulation, if it's on private property, like if it's on the building, then it probably should be in Title 21. So if Girdwood wants to say every new building, if you've got lights on it, they need to look a certain way, that would be appropriate in Title 21, Chapter 9. In the right of way, I think they would generally go into DCM. We'd be trying to move, so anything in the right of way doesn't get regulated through the zoning, because generally zoning just works on property.
Except that street and trail lighting standards are in Title 21, right? So that's the weird wackiness, because those are generally in the right of way, but they are still in Title 21.
There are pieces of that all over Title 21 where it's trying to regulate regulate stuff that Brandon does, and then we do get into these weird problems.
Yeah.
As they've said, we've already adopted this regulation in ours. So our perspective is trying to move everything that's in the right of way, just the right of way. Like downtown, for example, has very specific lighting standards on the property, the way that lighting should look on buildings, but those don't apply when they're doing 4th Avenue lightings. You don't have to do the same sort of standard. So right now, Becky's right. The code shows that there's rules for trails, even though that may be on right of way or public property, or I guess it was public property too, but if there was a trail in a right of way right now, yeah, the code does regulate it.
And streetlights, right? Because it's a.
And streetlights. So you could change that. Again, it's all gets decided by the assembly. We're trying to move towards stuff in right of way gets regulated by PMD, traffic, stuff on property gets regulated by zoning, but that's sort of the way things are. Girdwood, of course, just updated their plan. And it's going to be updated the zoning over time, so. Maybe first step.
Where is the standard about whether lighting is continuous or not? Because it doesn't look like it's in 1021. Is that in the DCM or is that on a case by case basis based on a new road or development?
It's in the DCM, although there are, of course, the Girdwood code, there's a provision that says street lighting in local residential streets should be avoided if possible, which I guess let me back that up. It's a both. So 2108, which is our subdivision code, excludes rural areas from street lighting. So the street lighting applies in the urban areas. So there's a table in Title 21 and 2108 that says if you're in an urban area, yes, you have to put in street lights. If you're in a suburb, if you're in a rural area, no, you don't. And then sort of the Girdwood code extends that to say, regardless of the area, whether it's residential, rural or urban, if it's a local roadway, we prefer not to get them. But the once code says, yes, this shall be lit, and the standard is continuous lighting.
And that's set by the DCM. Okay. So to Mike's point, it does sound like the overall equation of how roads are lit and properties are lit in Girdwood is governed in part by Title 21 and in part by the DCM. So both would likely need to be amended to exercise wholesale change over the standard, right? So if the desire was to say, we don't want any more continuous lighting requirement in Girdwood, and we want lights to be shorter, and we want, because it seems like the levers you can pull are the cutoff, right? The I don't know how the level of light is measured from the light itself, but I assume that's something that can be toggled, and then also the height of the light fixture, right? So kind of the three things, and then how close together they are. So what you can, the like different levers you can pull in terms of how bright or dark an area is.
Well, when you get into kind of tweaking some of those lighting level levers, if you get out of sort of conforming to industry best practices, and so there's a risk involved. And then one of the problems you get into with lighting in particular is if you're alternating between light to dark, light to dark, light to dark as you're going down a road.
Then your eyes have a hard time acclimating. Acknowledging all of that, and just in terms of like, if the desire was to say we're going to have accept more safety risk in return for a darker community, those are the different things you could change. And those things are governed by a combination of Title 21 and the DCM and Girdwood. And they are currently governed they are currently designed in Girdwood to be more restrictive than in Anchorage to be darker. But I think the question, Mike, you guys are raising is it dark enough? And then what's the trade-off? Is that right?
Well, somewhat, but I also really wanted to work with a developer. So I'm delighted. I hope your ears weren't burning. I was just talking about you in our conversation. So could I refer to you directly here and just say that from our conversation, I understood that we might have a shared interest in having lower light poles. And then it turned into a conversation within the Girdwood community. Maybe we need to step away from this, like labeling it as dark sky, but just a general interest within the community, both for the sake of aesthetics and for dark sky principles and other things, to have lower light poles. And so we thought, okay, well, how complicated is this? Do we have to work with every developer who then has to try to get a variance for, do we have to go through this every time, or can we agree that we would like a more universal look throughout Girdwood? And so I really appreciated the things that I learned from you during our conversation, and then also the fact that there might be possibilities for a win-win. Did I sum that up correctly?
Yeah, I think in answer to your first part of the question, developers, or whatever project they're in, has to work with the municipality for the lighting. And we ask many times for variances as far as for that lighting is concerned. Primarily about the distance between them. I've noticed in Girdwood that you have some very attractive lights in the town area. And I was hoping that really we could do something rather distinctive within a reasonable budget of making Woolton Hills very attractive. And I think we don't have very much opportunity aesthetically because we have to follow the water line. It's really a straight road. You know, maybe we can get an eyebrow in. You know, it's just straight. Yeah. Usually we would like to have some variance in the road, but in this particular case, it's not possible because the water is already there. So something that would be aesthetically pleasing alongside of the road, I think would be attractive. What that means or is has to do with municipality, and with what we can afford to do. There's sort of a balance there that we have to create. But I would hope that there's one thing that we could agree on that would be aesthetically attractive, reasonably priced, and still have safety issues.
So I did want to clarify one thing about that. And Mike, I do see your hand up. I'll toss it to you in a moment. Just one clarification. When I was talking with the community about this and using the Dark Sky website for information, we sold it as not hurting safety, not affecting safety. And it was very important for our road maintenance and the things to not affect safety. So there's a limit, like we can't go to 4 feet long, right? So that's not going to work. But it would be, it stands out for me, Ms. Yoshimura, that as you mentioned that, like the developers are going to the city and asking for variance, it would be great if we could find a way for Girdwood to be able to agree that in general, we would like lower light posts, especially in residential areas, at least 20-foot requirement, and whether or not it's dark sky or not, just to have it be more suited to our rural landscape and smaller town. And then to also have the cohesiveness throughout the town. I appreciate that you liked the lights in one place and would be interested in doing something similar or related because that cohesiveness can help tie a community together. Sorry, Mike, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Really interesting discussion. I appreciate Becky's summary that it looks like it's a combination of both Title 21 and DCM. DCM, I believe, is currently going through an update. When is lighting likely to be updated? So when would we have a chance to sort of use the revision process rather than doing something separate?
We don't have a timeline on the lighting chapter yet. Our next focus is going to be on the streets chapter and the traffic control chapter. So we're in the approval stage for 3 other chapters. We haven't scheduled when lighting is going to occur yet.
Sorry, so is lighting a separate chapter from streets?
Yes.
Okay, got it. So we may want to do something independent. Thank you. Oh, actually, I did have one other quick question. You mentioned earlier, I think, Brandon, that the difference between rural and urban, is that the same as the difference between Class A and Class B land?
It is, yes.
Yeah, because a lot of Girdwood is Class A, so it's considered to be urban within the DCM, I think. So it's not like Girdwood is treated as rural. It generally has to follow urban standards. So I just want to make sure for the record there's not a misunderstanding there. Thank you.
And I guess I'm not sure that the DCM update is an avenue for achieving something different than Girdwood. Maybe it could be, but I don't see, and obviously we haven't started the chapter. We'll need to consider what the public wants and our ability to kind of meet public's desires, but also it's unlikely that the DCM would propose a standard that isn't consistent with kind of industry standard in terms of lighting levels. And so, if Girdwood's just explicitly wants a different standard, it may not come through the DCM. And you pointed out that your desire is not actually to influence safety in negative ways. And our standards, that's what we're focused on, is achieving the industry standard for providing safe lighting.
So just swinging back around, I do want to wrap this up. I know we've talked about this for a while. I guess I'm still not clear on if Girdwood would like to change this. What's the first step, or how can we do it, or can we do it?
I think you could propose it. You have the power to propose a Title 21 change,
Okay,
which would be a piece of this. So I think the challenge would be, I think, it would be, as we've discerned, it would be both. It would probably involve some combination of both the DCM and Title 21, because Title 21 governs the height, location, and cutoff of the light fixtures. You guys can correct me if I'm off base on this, but it doesn't actually govern the continuous lighting standard where continuous lighting is required. Where continuous lighting is required is governed by the DCM. So if the concern, the overall lighting concern encompasses both pieces, then to address the whole picture, it sounds like both documents, both Title 21 and the DCM may need to be part of a rewrite. Tell me if I'm off base here. Bring it to the room.
I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
Brandon can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Brandon was saying earlier is that the industry safety standards generally probably don't allow they don't envision discontinuous lighting. So the uniformity, I think, is the term. So widely spaced lighting that results in light, dark. I think right now we wouldn't envision rolling that into the DCM because it's not in conformance with industry standards. But if it were in Title 21, the 2109 section for Girdwood that said lighting in Girdwood shall be discontinuous, that would.
Got it. Okay, so 21 would be the place to do it.
I think it'd be Title 21.
There were some options where we could say it's like lighting is disfavored on this classification of roads in Girdwood, or have lighting at intersections, or the way that said, I think, did I hear you correctly that you said there's like in residential streets in Girdwood, lighting is disfavored?
Right, yeah, that's in code now. So
Yeah.
if there was another way we wanted to be sort of phrased in code or expanding in code somehow,
Okay.
would apply it.
So that means I'm taking back my previous statement and saying it would be entirely a Title 21 rewrite, because that would trump and guide the DCM, because otherwise the DCM will by default always defer to engineering best practice and not to the policy choice. Yes. Okay.
But then we will be
Yeah,
setting
the
up a
going to
situation.
tell me.
Well,
It's
no.
not true.
No, everything you said,
Yeah. Yeah.
right on, but then we're gonna be in a situation where people coming in to do a project will be jumping between the DC and Title 21.
So then we would have to clean that up in the lighting rewrite of the chapter, but we'll have a lag in between. And assuming there were a change in Title 21 that passed, that included changing lighting standard for Girdwood, we'd have a lag between the update to the lighting chapter of the DCM, because we'd presumably catch it and fix it when they update the lighting chapter of the DCM. Yeah, but we'd have a couple of years where people were like, wait a minute.
Yeah, and I mean, they're used to it now, but again, we would all then, the policy choice, whatever the
Yeah.
direction is, but we see Title 21 is for property, not for right of way.
Yeah,
Currently, it does both. And that's what we've been trying to do everywhere else.
got it. Yeah.
So,
I do think that there's a challenge in terms of laying out criteria for implementing dark skies beyond how we've already implemented it. Simply because lighting, street lighting in particular, is applied via luminance, which means it's the measurement that you're looking at is actually the amount of light that's reflecting off of the surfaces. And so regardless of how high the fixture is, you would adjust the fixture spacing to apply the same amount of illuminance. And so even, a narrower or a shorter light than 20, you're going to provide the same lighting levels, have the same amount of illuminance, create the same amount of reflection on the surfaces. And the fixtures will be full cutoff, which means that they will be shining up into the sky. They'll be shining straight down.
well, it sounds like we'll need more discussion about this, because I got the sense that both the developer and Girdwood in general would love lower than 20. And we're convinced from the research we've done that we don't need to have discontinuous lighting, that we can do it with continuous lighting. So why don't we, this sounds like it's, we've uncovered some of it and have some ways forward, and I think we'll just talk about it again next time. Does that sound good, unless we have anything else to add to this, or did you have anything else, Connie?
And developers hate variances, so however simple you can make it, the better it can be. Thus, they'll quite pressure. And, you know, we also have a timeline that we're working towards. And so as much as I would like to have lower lighting or lighting at fewer than a certain number of steps, if I can be perfectly frank, that's not going to hold us up from proceeding as quickly as we can. Thank you.
And this is a broader question that you guys want to explore, not just for the hometown development, but just writ large for the community, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate that feedback because that the piece, especially about developers hating variances, which I remember from a conversation that we had too, I thought this is why we need to tackle this as a community and not because actually, I don't think it's just the developers that hate the variances. So thank you very much for that feedback. Yeah. All right, I'm going to move on unless we have anything else to add from that. All right. 4, review request of GBOS in the MOA 50th anniversary resolution and how to implement them. Mike, do you want to address this?
Yeah, sure. I'll give it a go. So I know some of you have seen the resolution we passed earlier about the 50th anniversary of unification. It's probably no surprise that unification is not necessarily seen as 100% positive in every way from Girdwood. We used to be a city. Girdwood voted against unification, still got it. I think in any more rational organization, we would probably still have we would still be a city of some sort and have city-like powers. We obviously don't. So following the sort of some of the language which the mayor has used as well to increase the sort of the power and control, I think, in outlying communities, we published we passed a resolution which asked for several steps. Some of these are actually in action. For example, we've already got one of the powers to initiate land use changes in Title 21 at the last assembly meeting. Thank you very much indeed to everyone who worked on that. I guess the question really, it's kind of a philosophical question, a broader question. How far can communities go? We have a service area model rather than a city model. So we're not a separate municipal entity, and we can't be under a unified municipality. But we do have basically our own services. About half our taxes are paid for our own local services that we run. And I guess the question is, we can make some changes around the edges, and we will probably come up with more changes we want to make or we'd like to push for. But I'm really interested in, from the administration side, what structural changes are feasible, which perhaps go too far. How far can we get towards having similar city-like powers? I mean, in principle, I suppose we could go as far as the school board, in that the school board has. The assembly says yes or no to budget, but the assembly doesn't go in and create a budget or change policies. I don't think Girdwood can quite get that far under current structure, but the closer we can get to it, I think the better. So there's just final word. There's a word used apparently in both the European Union and the Catholic Church called subsidiarity, which is this principle that decision making is pushed down to the lowest level, which is feasible or reasonable. And I guess that's really what we're asking for. We're asking for as close as possible to decision making, and maybe not final budget, yes, no, but basically policy direction being pushed down towards our community when it's only affecting our community. It is frustrating when something which only affects Girdwood is voted on by 12 people, none of whom reside here, many of whom have very, very different motivations and representation. So that's the broad question.
It's a good question, Rick, and I was saying to Jennifer as we came in that this question that we talked about last week prompted me to go back and think a lot about the powers of first and second class cities and home rule cities within organized boroughs, because I haven't thought through that in depth in a while since I was the municipal attorney and gave a training, I think, for new assembly members about what the different classifications of cities and boroughs mean in Alaska and what they can do. And I was also saying, we don't have a ton of models remaining. I'm sure, thinking of actually incorporated boroughs that have reasonably high functioning cities that have actually taken on the powers that cities can elect to take on. I think Fairbanks to me is the most, if I think about what would happen if Girdwood became a home rule or a first or second class city because you have a population that exceeds 400 people within a borough of Anchorage in that hypothetical future universe. Fairbanks to me is probably the most reasonable comparable model because they have a functioning borough and they also have a functioning city government within that borough, which is different than city and borough of Juneau and different than all the cities that exist within the unincorporated borough. And so in my head, I think the farthest limit of what you could possibly do is what would happen is if you were an independently incorporated city, right? Which still wouldn't give you the education power because that always sits with the borough. Still wouldn't give you the planning, platting, or zoning power because that would stay with the borough. It would give you the power of police, parks and rec, fire, which you effectively have within the service area. It would give you the power to tax and spend, which you effectively have within the service area. And I think the real difference is what you're talking about, which is the voting on legislation. That's really what the crux of it is and the hardest thing to chip away at because almost every functional power that the city would have, Girdwood already has through the service area model. And it's really the fact that anytime you want to change something that impacts Girdwood that's in municipal code, it has to go to the assembly is what I was chewing on this over the weekend, reading like municipal league handouts about different classifications of cities. And so I don't know, this is a philosophical answer to your philosophical question, because I don't know practically speaking kind of what that means. I think that does kind of mean we sort of tackle each individual question as it comes short of secession. And honestly, if I like my 2 cents on like if Girdwood were to try to seek to become an independent city within the borough of Anchorage, what would that mean? You'd have to weigh, I think, the question of paying for the infrastructure to tax and spend on your own, like paying for your own little mini government to deal with all of that, the benefit, like the cost of that versus the benefit of then the self-governance of having 12 representatives from Girdwood vote on Girdwood-based laws as opposed to 12 representatives from the greater borough of Anchorage. And there are pluses and minuses of each of those things. But I don't think it wouldn't fundamentally impact your control over schools or over Title 21 or over police or fire. It would just impact your control over laws and then your obligation to deal with the structure of government that, runs all of those different things and pays for the things and collects the taxes. So I don't know. That's a very long and wordy answer that isn't saying anything practical. What do you want to specifically talk about, Mike? Is there anything specifically within that? I know you want to talk a little bit more about short-term rentals, and I know we have the HLB work session coming up, which will continue to tackle the question of adding that additional seat to the HLB commission to increase the Girdwood voice in that body. But what other things can we specifically talk about today within that broader paradigm of trying to kind of chip away at the things that we're to give the Girdwood community autonomy that exceeds current autonomy, but still acknowledging that it comes short of the full autonomy to pass laws without the review and vote of the Anchorage Assembly.
Yeah, I think given where we are in terms of time, we probably can't go much further than we have already. I want to make sure the topic was on the agenda and there was at least, this initial discussion, and then we can take on particular details. I think short-term rental is a great example of the problem where there is clearly there is a completely different scale of problem in Girdwood to the rest of the municipality. And 10 members of the assembly represent people who own and operate short-term rentals in Girdwood but do not live in Girdwood. They represent and many of those, and nobody who lives in this community. So when there's a mismatch between impact between the community itself and people outside of that community who have economic interest in certain outcomes, we have at least 10 members of the assembly who only represent one of those two groups, and maybe up to between 0 and 2 people who actually represent the community itself. So that's, I think, one of the most stark examples. And we've been trying to get regulation for about 6 or 7 years, and effectively had the very, very, very first steps of it a few weeks ago. So that's, I think, a very good example of the sort of problem we've been facing. And it's something to chew on in the future of how could that be better. But I don't think now, given our time, we probably can't go any further now. but I would like to continue this discussion next meeting and in the intervening time. I think in comparison with other communities, North Pole is one that's smaller than Girdwood. It's got a much lower population than Girdwood. It's still a city within Fairbanks North Star Borough. And of course, there are plenty of examples, Sue as an example, etc. Homer on the Kenai Peninsula. That's probably the closest. That's obviously the closest geographically.
All right. Anything you want to say about, I feel like our Bob is here because he has sort of inherited the short-term rentals project from Bill. So maybe more just to say formally going forward, Bob is going to be working in the space as our staff point of contact for the issue. Yeah.
Honestly, I'm still catching up on class 1 and class 2 cities. I understand that the intent though is to stay within an organized borough as opposed to move outside into an unorganized borough and to pick up the additional obligations that would entail for Girdwood. But I welcome ongoing discussions, ideally between these meetings, and we have more time to deep dive.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to Mike too for your awareness of time and for all of that. I think that this is an item that we will return to because there's been deep. Yes. Okay. SWS requests. This is discussing fee increase, requests for recycling, requests for a Sunday service in the Girdwood transfer station. We talked about this during the pre-meeting. Do you want me to recap or do we just jump in?
Well, let's start with maybe the things that are directed toward SWS as sort of SWS specific questions about service level, which is the request for recycling and Sunday service at Girdwood. So can we start there? Because those will go directly to Kelly Toth, our SWS director. So Kelly, could you maybe step into? You're echoing a lot, Kelly.
I'm echoing?
Yeah, with you unmuted, we're having a real echo. Now we don't have it.
Still
Now
echo?
we.
That's weird.
Yes.
You didn't change it.
The conference room may need to mute when Kelly's speaking.
Okay, do you want to try that? Does that work?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Let me explain what the question is, and then I will mute while you answer it. I think per the email I circulated in advance, the question is about potentially, expanding recycling service in Girdwood, and also potentially Sunday service at the Girdwood transfer station. Now we will mute, and I will allow you to respond.
Thank you. I would say that it would be very problematic at this time for us to look at opening the Sunday service, but we will take another look at what the volume is, because the way it works right now, I believe that the transfer trucks go there on Monday and make their run depending on the volume. So we can certainly take another look at it. The issue there is if we open up the gates on a Sunday, none of our other facilities are open on a Sunday. And also that trash has to go somewhere. When we collect it, we actually go and bury it actively at the face at the landfill. That day we don't store trash anywhere. So I'm not sure yet how that could happen, that we would be able to be open on a Sunday, just based on the fact that the face is not open and operational on Sundays. As far as recycling goes, I just learned that things had changed based on what I had heard from a few years ago. Certain people have moved on or are not offering recycling in Girdwood. So I spoke with our recycling coordinator and we talked about perhaps having recycling days. SWS is working. Last year we did 2 pilot electronics collection days. And so we could certainly be open to identifying electronics, for example, cardboard and aluminum cans as collection for those days. And then we would go there, we would collect it all, and then we would bring it all back to Anchorage. So I think that could be a good first step into meeting that request. I will mute now.
Unmute you.
You
Can you unmute us?
Yeah, we're unmuted.
Okay. Oh, we're on mute. Okay, excellent. Sorry, orchestrating the system. What would, now it's gonna be awkward, we're gonna have to do it again. What would the next step then be, Kelly? Because it sounds like you guys would be, if we could start that as a pilot, and that's something Girdwood would be very interested in doing. What are the next steps then, Kelly, and what might do you need anything from the community? What would be the next steps they could expect?
So thank you. The next steps will be the recycling diversion coordinator is already in conversation with folks there. So it would be identifying which days we're going to do it, plan the outreach, and execute.
Excellent. Anything? Okay, I would like to just clarify one thing about the Sunday service. I'll be super quick on this. That Girdwood's not just saying, hey, we want the whole weekend. The interest in Sunday really has to do with, again, remind everyone that we have an almost 20% saturation rate with STRs. And Sunday is a really common turnover day for STRs because everyone's returning to their work in Anchorage or wherever they live in the lower 48. And so the problem for us, especially given our concentration of bears, is that the trash is left inside homes or outside homes because there's no place else to do it. So this isn't us saying we want all the weekend days. And I do understand the limitations that you mentioned. I just want to explain that our unique circumstances make Sunday very, if anything, possibly our biggest trash day. So anyway, I think that's that. Unless you had anything you wanted to add.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't know that on a biggest trash day, not having the landfill open with a crew of operators to be able to bury it, as following our landfill permit, we are required to compact and cover the trash daily. So we don't really have a provision for storing it overnight. I'm always open to ideas and creative thinking, but at this time, I don't know that I have an answer for that.
To understand who's being behind. So thank you. Yeah, sorry.
Could I ask a very quick question of Kelly? That's okay. Yeah, Kelly, so is my understanding then at the moment the trash, the trailer is taken away every day that Girdwood is open and moved to the landfill? Is that how it currently works?
When the transfer trucks are full, then we pick up the transfer truck and we take it to the landfill. But I'm thinking Sundays.
So not necessarily every day.
That I understand, no. There are many days when the maximum number of people that visit the Girdwood, we may be open the entire time, but only get probably, I think our lowest time was 11 guests, 11 customers in one day. So that doesn't fill up a transfer truck, no.
Yeah, understood. So so in effect, there is trash stored at the Girdwood transfer location many nights.
Not overloaded and brimming, no.
Not overloaded, no, but if it's not full.
And Mondays are usually a day when we do empty the trailers.
Understood. Thank you.
I think if that's it on that, let's move on to the discussion of the legal opinion. I don't know whether to jump.
Well, I think we missed the fee increase piece. I want to make sure that we have Shannon here to talk a little bit about what the fee is going toward and the fact and what Girdwood can access the new Healthy Spaces team to perform in terms of trash removal services. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So this fee has allowed our Healthy Spaces team to expand to 10 additional full-time employees. So year round, they've all been seasonal in the past, and Usually in the wintertime, it drops off greatly and we only have like 7 people working. So we'll have a total of 15 full-time and then still 14 seasonals in the summer. And we've expanded outside of parkland, so it's all public property that
So
we can report.
trash on the road, trash in the median, trash in any public land that is looking trashy. We are here to be traffic.
And there's a reporting tool, and if somebody reports trash that is on private property, they'll get notification, but that same notification will go to code enforcement, where then they will investigate and work with the property owner. So, and then we'll just dispatch from there. And I know Kyle knows how to get a hold of our team.
And I would say, I did have a question for you guys, because that sounded like one of the concerns, and it's a concern we've heard in Anchorage too, is the question of like, are we disproportionately impacting small users? And I wanted to ask that as a follow-up question, is that, I know there's one piece of concern, which is Girdwood paying for service that Girdwood is using less than other parts of the city? But is another part of the concern people who are bringing like one bag of trash, feel like they're paying more for that? Okay, that's helpful to know, because I think that's something that I've heard elsewhere, and we just implemented this, so we're learning as we go. So it's helpful to know that, and we can think of, we can put that in the list of concerns we are hearing repeatedly as we continue to think about this and tweak it. I'm not promising any kind of immediate anything, but just knowing that that's part of the flavor of concern is helpful, because it is a concern we've heard in Anchorage too, of like, are we disproportionately layering the fee on people with very small trash loads? And is there some scaling that would make sense? So that's helpful to know that that's part of it. Bryce, I think.
Bryce.
Thank you, Chair. This is Bryce. I'm a community member in Girdwood, also vice chair of the Land Use Committee, our community council in Girdwood. I'm a little disappointed by this SWS discussion, because I'm kind of looking at this, and the major questions I have and concerns are, yes, a lot of people that visit the SWS transfer station in Girdwood are dropping off 1 or 2 bags of trash and are being now disproportionately charged almost 100% more than what they were just a few months ago. The Healthy Spaces team, frankly, doesn't really visit Girdwood, and the last time they did was my recalling 2024. So it's been a long time since they ever do. And so what it seems like is that Girdwood's paying additional service fees disproportionately for services that are occurring mostly in Anchorage. And then as for adding additional trash service on Sunday, I don't understand the landfill discussion comes into this, if the trash is staying there overnight already as is. So if you're taking it on Monday too, if you're worried about overfilling, I'd be curious to see how that actually looks if you are becoming too full. And then lastly, regarding recycling, the whole reason this was brought up in Land Use Committee to begin with is that you guys are charging currently SWS at least, charging a recycling surcharge fee, which we don't really have any access to except for hazmat recycling there, primarily with oil disposal. So that's the major concern, is that other transfer stations in the community have recycling. We don't, we're still being charged fees for that. And now we're subject to 100% fee increase. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have a feeling we're gonna be talking about this in the end.
Yeah, understood. Yeah,
Okay.
Appreciate the discussion. Yeah.
All right, let's move on. We'll try to get this done as quickly as possible. The discussion of MOA legal opinion preventing PZC from discussing or recommending conditions on Fulton Hills housing. And Mike, I think you do have a very short way of explaining this.
I will try and do it very briefly. I know the legal department is very versed on this, but I think there are many frustrations about the Fulton Hills project. I'm not going to rehash them all, but the most recent thing was that during earlier discussion when the land was disposed of, so that was when the assembly action occurred, there were a number of points we brought forward about the project itself. And in many cases, we were told that this will not be decided until the planned unit development application is in, because it relates to conditions around the planned unit development. When we get to the planned unit development discussion at planning and zoning, we then heard the decision or at least the advice from the legal department that anything relating to housing or land use could not be discussed at planning and zoning, because the assembly had made some conditions in that area, and therefore all the discussion had to have happened at the assembly. And even if the assembly gave the opinion that things could be done later, planning and zoning was not able to do so. So, in a colloquial way, it feels very bait and switchy. I don't think that was necessarily the intent, but what I want to understand is, how does that affect things in the future? Is there any, are there further, is everything closed forever? is all discussions about land use and use of the project and any future conditions now, for any future variants also blocked off? And how do we avoid this problem in the future? Because it feels very disenfranchising.
And I think that the other things that Mike, and I think that the way we were trying to think about it on our end too was, I know last time we talked about it in the pre-meeting, you said the sort of the succinct phrasing of the question of next time there's a development in Girdwood, at which point on HLB land, at which point should the community really be advocating for any conditions on the development that they would like to see? And like, how do we do it differently next time? Was sort of how I was thinking about the question. I was talking about it with staff. And I don't know if Quincy, if you feel like you and Zach are prepared to kind of talk about that.
I mean, I've definitely thought about it but I feel like I have more questions than answers because I was there for this whole process and I feel like we heard from Girdwood residents over and over and over again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make that sound negative, but you were there at all the public meetings, pre-disposal and at the disposal meeting. You were talking about short-term rentals and maybe workforce housing came up too. I don't remember exactly, but I feel like your concerns were heard. And in like this rare case, were actually incorporated into the disposal document. So I'm just confused about what you think wasn't heard. And then I guess I will add just like my little legal disclaimer as like one assembly member telling you that you could come back later at some later stage of the process is not like, they're not speaking on behalf of the entire assembly. So I'm sorry if they gave you bad information, but the actual word of the assembly came in the ordinance. And I guess I thought they did a better job than they even, sometimes do at hearing you out. So I apologize because I was part of all of this machine and still have questions about what you think wasn't heard. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's tough I don't know if like, I wasn't part of all the conversations about Holton Hills and I don't know that we can like relitigate or rehash all of the like what was incorporated when and what couldn't have been incorporated when here in this space. I think my going forward thought, and I'll let the actual lawyers tell me like if they think that
I didn't answer that.
this is no, but just if I could like I think about like if I thought about the question of going forward, like as like from my attorney background and land attorney background, I think it is always a better place to incorporate any kind of guiding restriction or language at the time of transfer rather than later within the permitting framework, because the CUP framework and the PUD framework is all governed by code, and there are parameters within code about what can and cannot be changed and how much leeway you have. Whereas when you were a landowner selling your own land, you were essentially governed only by and we're governed by the public interest in terms of what we can do when we sell land. And then we're governed by the bumpers of the Constitution. We can't put provisions on land that are illegal. But other than that, we have a lot of flexibility. So that is the provision. That would be my 2 cents about going forward. It is always the land transfer where we have the most flexibility to guide what happens with land that belong to the municipality and that we are selling to a private entity. Does that sound right to you guys? If we're giving advice about what to do going forward. Yeah, and I don't know if that's at all helpful, Mike. I know it's probably a vast oversimplification and you probably knew that already. And it doesn't actually really help with what happened in terms of the Holton Hills conversation. But again, I think it's hard to pick apart all of that here and figure out what happened, that didn't happen. But just to say going forward, I think that's the point of the hardiest conversation is really when we sell land. It was municipal land, when we have the most of ability to guide what happens to that land.
I agree with you. I think the point at which to put the restrictions on use is when the land is actually transferred. That's the sort of foundational point. I guess to the question for Quincy then is the planning and zoning did make quite a large number of conditions on various aspects of the development. The assembly spoke on a few things back in the original AO. So there must be some judgment on where the boundary of those things are, because clearly other conditions were acceptable. So conditions on aspects of plot aspect of the road and other things. Variances were granted. So how should we understand where that boundary is between topics the Assembly spoke on and therefore is outside of the scope of any future P&Z action and topics they did not speak on? Because that's not clear to me either. So crudely, they did make conditions, but they couldn't make conditions on any housing or land use aspects, apparently.
Tell me if this answers your question. One thing that the Assembly did find was anything having to do, well, not anything having to do, but short-term rentals and which lots were going to be dedicated to those was going to come later through the homeowners association bylaws. And I am sorry if I'm not remembering this correctly, but I thought the question from the commission that night was, can we talk more about short-term rentals? And our answer was like, that's already been decided. It's already part of the development agreement. The Assembly's already spoke on it. So we would advise not to pass any conditions that are going to contradict that. And then I feel like the direction just went towards like standard Title 21 requirements. Right, Daniel? Daniel has something to say.
Yeah, I'll just add in because Mike, there was a lot of good discussion, right? And I think a lot of the discussion was about the subdivision case. So a lot of the things they were going back and forth about was the specifics of conditions on the plat. And that wasn't, although it ran alongside the conditional use process, that was the subdivision process. So I'm looking at the resolution and the conditions that were, this is approval subject to all standards in Title 21 for what a PUD is. The applicant shall submit for review by the commission the articles of incorporation and bylaws, and a notice of zoning action and final approved site plan shall be filed with the state recorder's office. Those are the conditions on the conditional use permit. But on that subdivision, which was running alongside it, there were a bunch of changes, and those were changes to plat notes. So I know for most people in the audience, it looked like all the same thing, but from our perspective, at least, there's two distinct cases that didn't run together.
Okay, so to summarize what you said, Daniel, and I'm going to mess this up, you're saying that conditions were applied to the plan unit development, to the subdivision case, sorry, but not to the conditional use. And to me, it seemed like it was in both.
Well, I mean, you're right, because they were discussed together and they were really running together. The conditional use permit is a permit to do the PUD, and it has its set of criteria. So they have to look at criteria. The subdivision can be approved according to a different set of criteria. So the conditions they talked about, at least, and those will be in the resolution, they go to the next DCC meeting, you'll see there's those three conditions. But I would also look on the subdivision, that's where you see all the plat notes that they sort of changed. You know, there's something like 9, I believe. But so there were two sort of discussions there. I know they both looked like it was conditions all on the same thing, but one was on the subdivision, which is about the way the land, you know, where the lines are drawn. And the other was about the PUD, about the uses that would be there and sort of basically the lot sizes, dimensions, that sort of thing.
Yes, and I think our concern's more about the uses. That's where a lot of the recommendations in the areas we'd like to have had some input in. But I mean, I this didn't quite answer my question, but I think it's definitely clarified what a better path forward is. So focus very much on the land transfer when it's public land, and I know that's what we would do anyway. But I think the importance of it, and really the fact there's only really one bite of the cherry in practice, is good to know. Thank you.
Much bigger bite, at least. I think you have smaller bites. Yes, smaller bites in the land use process. Okay, Kent, you want to take the gravel question?
Sure.
It's a quick answer.
Right. So I talked with a bunch of folks, several folks at DOT, and I think that unfortunately the proposed regulation sounds more promising than it really is for work in the municipality, including Girdwood. It's really intended to provide gravel for things like the Ambler Road, the gas line project. And the way it would work, it could apply in South Central, but the way it would work is it's a large project where it's economical for a contractor to come in, get a gravel permit from the state, get the gravel for free, crush the gravel, screen it, and use it on a project. So there's the contractor would have to absorb that cost. We buy our gravel from Anchor Sand and Gravel. Contractors in Girdwood get it from various commercial sources. There's really not an opportunity. It could be done under the proposed regulation, but there are no sources in the area, and it's primarily, it's not economical for a contractor to come in and go to all that effort to bring in a screening plant, heavy equipment, crush and sort and transport material. They could probably buy cheaper from Anchor Sand and Gravel. That's the bottom line, unfortunately.
Well, that was the answer I was afraid of, but thank you
Yep.
for researching it. I really appreciate it. I couldn't help but alert to that because gravel has been an ongoing issue for Girdwood in a number of ways. And right now what we're doing is paying top import fees, basically. All right, I think that that's it. I assume we do not have any public comment, but if I'm wrong about that, let me know. And if not, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.